Thank you so much for streaming our latest message from First Baptist Church. Here at FBC, our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. We do that by thinking big, thinking small, thinking in, and thinking out. We hope that this message helps you as you continue to grow in your faith. If you would like to stay connected to FBC, you can visit our website at FBCLLOYD.ca, look us up on Facebook and Instagram, or download our free mobile app. Now here's the latest from FBC. Enjoy.
Hey guys, thank you so much for being here this morning. This is our fourth and final week of our Turn It Up series, like Sean and Talcy already said. And I really hope that you guys have been enjoying the series so far. And more than just enjoying it, I hope that you guys have been able to get something, whether it's big or small, out of this series. This series really is kind of like a series about the core of who we are as a church here at FBC. This is, if I were to say, kind of like the DNA of who we are as a church. If you've been here for a while, you'd hear us talk about these kinds of themes, these four things that we talk about a lot. You've heard us talk about them a bunch. And if you stay here for a while, you'll hear us talk about them a lot. And maybe you'll feel like it's repetitive, but we always want to come back to the core, the center of who we believe we should be as a church and how we strategically can continue to move forward on our mission. If you've missed any of the series, I'd encourage you to catch up online with it. But I want to give you guys a quick recap of where we've been so far. So in week 1, Doug got up and he just challenged you guys to turn it up. He challenged you guys to turn it up in the ways that you think in. And we said that the series kind of comes down to everything being all about thinking in. Everything being about engaging personally with God. Because we believe that that is kind of foundational and fundamental to everything we do as a Christian. To call yourself a Christian, you need to engage personally with God. And at FBC, our mission, hopefully you know it, is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And that requires personal engagement with God. In the second week, I got up and challenged you guys to think bigger, to turn it up in the ways that you think big, to take advantage of the amazing opportunity that God's given you to experience faith in Him in community, in the large corporate community of believers that He's given us. And we have a really cool church community that we get to do that in. And then the next week, Doug encouraged you guys to love better. And this is our Think Small component, to engage in smaller relationships, to have those few, hopefully a small group that you're a part of, where you continue to engage personally with God in the ways that you experience relationships. And hopefully you don't get the picture that, you should think big or think small, and if you're doing one, that kind of negates the other, but hopefully you get the idea that these create a holistic picture of what it means to pursue faith in Jesus Christ and community. And all of these, we said, are to your benefit. All of these are for the chief purpose of all of us being able to grow in our relationship with Jesus Christ. When we say that our mission is to have a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, growing means changing. That means a relationship with Jesus Christ that doesn't just always look the same. Not the sense that, I've arrived, I'm content, I'm just okay here. We should always be content and satisfied in who Jesus is, but we should always desire more because there's always room for growth, and that's an amazing truth. And then today, I want to wrap up the series, like Sean said, by challenging you guys to live louder. And so for me, I kind of think about when we talk about thinking big and small and in, after that, I kind of think, well, so now what? Those are all things that help me grow in my relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are things that all draw me closer to Jesus. But now what do I do with that? Where do we go from here? And that's what I want to chat with you guys about this morning. And I want to quickly say, when we get together as a staff and we plan out these different series that we're going to talk about, we pray and we try to come up with things that we think are really relevant, and we talk about a whole bunch of different things. And I want to say we have we try to have pretty realistic expectations. We don't expect, hey guys, if we do this Turn It Up series, we talk about these 4 things, we'll never need to talk about them again. Everyone in our church will probably go out and read their Bible for 23 hours a day and then pray for the other 40 hours a day. I know that's bad math, but they'll sell everything they have to give to the poor, and they'll bring 5,000 friends to church next week. Now, you're allowed to do all that if you want, except for the bad math part. But really, what we hope for when we do a series like this is simply what the series is called, is that we'll all continue to turn it up. And so maybe over these few weeks, you've heard something or you've thought about something where you're like, you know what, that's actually something that I could make a bit of a significant change in my life. That's a real growth area for me where I could really turn it up. But maybe you're like, you know what, things are going pretty well, or maybe they're not even going well, but you found an area where you're like, I could take a baby step there. And we celebrate that. Any type of change and growth in a relationship with Jesus Christ is awesome. And so whether it's a slight turn up or a huge turn up in your life, we hope that this series encourages you in one of these regards to do that. Anyways, we're going to keep on going, but I just want to pray really quickly. So join me as we pray. God, thank you so much that you love us. Thank you for this really cool faith community that we get to experience you through. Thank you that we get together, sing songs about you, talk about you, and just spend time enjoying the people that you've created. I ask that you would just show up and speak through me this morning, God, and that you would continue to work in our hearts to help us grow in our relationship with you. We love you so much, God. Amen. So if you have a bulletin, or if you've started using the app notes, if you haven't, they're really cool. I'd encourage you to check them out on the FBC app. They have all the fill in the blanks and everything, but there are a few fill in the blanks if you're into that kind of thing. But what I want to do this morning, how I've kind of phrased things this morning, is I want to ask you guys 3 questions. And now I'll be straight up front. These questions are kind of big, almost kind of really hard to answer because of the weight and depth of them, and a little bit ambiguous in some ways. But hopefully they're questions that can help us discover a little bit about ourselves and continue to turn it up in this area. So the first question is, how much do you love? Now, I know that's a hard question because, you can't be 7, there's no that kind of answer. Or else maybe you're like, well, what does he mean? How much do I love what? How much do I love pizza? Because a lot, I got a deep dish love for that, Or maybe you're like, what does he mean? How much do I love my kids? Because you're like, well, which day, Or maybe you're depends which kid, And I feel that because my sister was a perfect child growing up. And so, anyways, what I'm asking this morning, we're going to unpack this a little bit as we move through, and this is kind of going to be probably the main takeaway of the morning, is what I'm wondering is, how much do you actually love God, and how much do you actually love the people he's created? And not just limited to your family, not limited, but everyone, strangers, coworkers, friends, family, everybody. When I talk about people, I mean everyone. How much do you love? And how much do you actually love? When we talk about thinking in and thinking out here at FBC, we take that from a passage in Scripture that comes from Matthew 22, verses 37 to 39. And we're going to look at this morning. We're actually going to broaden the context a little bit. We're going to start in verse 34 and go to verse 40. But I want to just give you a little bit of context of what's going on. So Jesus, you can read about him in the 4 Gospels, Matthew through John in the Bible. And what happens is, kind of in his early 30s, he starts what we call his public ministry, where he goes out, and basically what he's doing is he's spending most of his time doing a lot of amazing things, but telling people about the message of God's amazing love and goodness and reconciliation that God offers. And he's talking about this, and this is what he's doing. And so what happens is Jesus becomes very famous, and not always in good ways. It's kind of like Justin Bieber. He's famous, but not always in good ways. I say his name, we all know who he is, but not all of us are like, oh yeah, except some people are, but they probably keep that a secret. But a lot of people like him, but a lot of people hate this Jesus guy. And I don't know why there's so many haters, but there are all these people who are all upset about this, and there's some kind of major groups that start opposing him. And 2 of those groups are called the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I'm not going to go into the whole chapter, but this is actually one of my favorite chapters of the Bible, just because it's hilarious how the Pharisees and Sadducees just kind of go back and forth, taking turns trying to trip up Jesus. And if you've read the Bible, you just know it never works. But anyways, this is what happens. He's had a discussion back and forth. And in verse 34, it says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. So here's this pro. He steps up. He says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And you guys, you've probably heard this if you've been in church for a while. If you've been in church 2 weeks ago, you probably heard it because I was talking about it as well. And Jesus is saying this is the first and greatest commandment. He's saying thinking in, engaging personally with God, loving God, not just passively with your words, but with every ounce, every fiber of your being, your heart, your soul, your mind, your everything, your energy, your time, your talents, your resources, your money, your thoughts, everything. Love God with all that. That is the first and greatest commandment. And then it continues on, and you've probably heard this. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. I don't know if you've read this whole book, if you've read the whole Bible. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. And if you have, I'd encourage you to do it again. It's an amazing book. I don't know if you've read this whole book. There are quite a few words in this book. To be fair, if you've never read this one has a lot of study notes in it, so it's like about half as big as this. But this is a big book. And Jesus says all of it hangs on these two commandments. All of it comes down to that. Now, the Bible talks about a lot of nuances and things in life, and we do that here at FBC as well. When we do different series, we talk about different aspects and elements of life, and we try to get into the nitty-gritty and come up with relevant topics and stuff. But all of it comes back down to this. If you're here on a Sunday morning, we're preaching something, and you're like, that in no way relates to loving God with all my heart, soul, and mind, and people in the same way, then we're off base. We are missing our target, because Jesus is saying your target, your sight should always be set on this in all that you teach, in all that you do. The Bible, when it talks about love, which it talks about a lot, it isn't talking about some kind of love that you can verbalize or say. You know, it's not talking about the type of love that a movie like The Notebook, which I have not seen for the record, but a movie like The Notebook or something like that portrays where, you know, first date, the music starts playing and people are making out on their first date, which I think is highly inappropriate anyways, but not that kind of love, but the type of love where someone would lay down their life for someone else. The Bible says that if we love people, we should be willing to sacrifice everything in our lives, including our very lives. It says that we should actively try to meet the needs of others before meeting our own interests. That we should put other people's needs above our own interests. That we should continue to strive to meet other people's needs. And we're going to come back to that idea of meeting people's needs in a second. Maybe in life, when you meet someone, you sometimes have a conversation with them and they tell you what they do as a job. And when you hear that, when you hear their job title, you can often at least take a pretty good guess, if not have a really good idea about what they do. But sometimes it's a little ambiguous. Someone has a job title where they say, this is what I do, this is my job title, and you kind of look at them, you're like, go on, so what? Okay, so for me, it's like someone's like, I'm an environmental scientist. And I'm like, what? I have no idea what you do. Do you have a lab somewhere where you look at dirt and test tubes? Are you building bombs? I don't know what you're doing. And maybe you guys are like, we all know what environmental scientists do, but I actually think that a lot of environmental scientists I talk to don't even know what they do. So you're probably wrong. Or else, you talk to someone, they're like, I'm going to university. You're like, for what? They're like, I'm majoring in anthropology with a minor in political science and communications. And you're like, so what are you going to do with your life, No offense if that's your major this morning, but, it's kind of ambiguous, and I hear those things and I just assume oil field, right? Because it's the part of the world we live in. But there are some job titles that aren't ambiguous. And no matter whether it's ambiguous or not, it carries a lot of weight about what you do and what your job description is. And a lot of job titles don't have a very ambiguous one. A plumber, what do? They plumb. You meet someone who's an electrician, you know that they wire electrical circuits, right? You meet a parent, you know that they raise children. You meet the President of the United States, you know that their job is to talk about China and build walls, right? You meet a pastor, their job is to sit around in their office and watch YouTube all day, right? I'm just kidding. Pastor Doug does not do that, okay? Pastor Doug sits in his office listening to Adele and weeping all day. So loud that it's hard for us to watch our YouTube videos. Okay. Those are pretty straightforward job titles. Another one that's pretty straightforward, as the Bible would describe it, is a Christian, a follower of Jesus, a disciple, a believer, whatever you want to call it, all the names that we have for that. And the Bible describes it as something that's pretty straightforward. It's not ambiguous. That if you say I'm a follower of Jesus, people should be able to know that means that you love God with every ounce of who you are, and you love others in the same very active, sacrificial way. It should be a selfless type of love. And I think when it comes to loving others, the church does an amazing job in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, our faith community here at FBC does a really awesome job. But I think a lot of times, we focus on a lot of what we're already doing a good job on and neglect and forget about showing love in one of the most fundamental, basic ways, most essential ways we should. As I said earlier, I believe that showing love, one of the best ways you can show love is to meet people's needs, to prioritize people's needs over your own interests, over your own comforts, over your own desires, is to prioritize people's needs. The Bible describes us as human beings who have only one fundamental need. When we talk about needs, we think about a lot of physical needs, but the Bible says that when you look at life as an eternal thing, as Jesus describes it, you have one need, and that is to engage personally with God. That is to experience the life-changing grace and love of Jesus Christ and to spend eternity with him, to experience his goodness and to experience relationship with him. And so often, we forget that the best way we can show love is to have our sights set on people experiencing the amazing love of Jesus Christ. Not to make other people like us, not to be like us, not to make other people be on our team, but so that they can experience what we've experienced that's so good. And if you're a Christian here this morning, if you're a follower of Jesus, which I'm going to assume a lot of us are, the thing is that you've had this need fulfilled. You've had this need generously filled by God in his amazing, generous, selfless love. But often we take that and we sit back and we don't do our best to share that with others. And I believe that the most loving thing a person could ever do is to help someone experience Jesus Christ's love. Maybe you've been looking around on a Sunday morning the last few weeks, and maybe you've noticed that there are more people here than there used to be. This place is filling up a little bit. Especially if you're an FBC Kids volunteer, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. A couple of weeks ago, we had over 200 kids here on a Sunday morning, which to me is really exciting. And not exciting because we can say, oh, our church has more people, or we're winning, or we're convincing people of what we believe, or anything like that. But it's exciting because I think about Lloydminster, a city that God deeply loves and cares about. And I think about the fact that there are 30,000 people in this city. And on a Sunday morning, most of them aren't here. Most of them aren't in the other churches in town. Most of them aren't prioritizing faith in Jesus Christ in their lives. Most of them haven't experienced the life-changing love of God like most of us have experienced. So we should be excited when more people come and hear about Jesus. We should be excited when we reach them because there are so many people that need to experience what we've experienced. I believe, this isn't highly theological, but I believe that when you decide to become a follower of Jesus, if Jesus wanted, he could just zap you and be like, yeah, come up to heaven, spend eternity with me because you've made the decision, you're good to go. But for some reason, he leaves us here. He's like, yeah, I know you've accepted me, but I'm going to let you live on earth for a while longer. Why? And I view it as an investment. Jesus says, I'm going to leave you here to accumulate interest. Why don't you bring some other people with you into eternity? Why don't you generate some more people that will spend eternity with me? And hopefully those people will do the same, and it will be a growing thing. So this morning when I say, how much do you love? I want to challenge the way that we usually think about this. And I just want to say when I talk about this too, so some of the things I'm saying might be kind of challenging or uncomfortable or sound idealistic. And I'm going to talk to you guys about this for, 30, 35 minutes this morning. When I spend 15 hours on this during a week, like working on a message and stuff, it is like God like train wrecking my life and convicting me and challenging me. And so I'm talking to myself as much as you guys this morning. But I want to challenge the ways we would normally approach this question and say, how much do you love? Because the answer shouldn't be wrapped up in the words. The answer should be wrapped up in how much our lives, through our actions and the words, show that we are actively and passionately trying to reach people with the good news of Jesus Christ and his amazing, life-transforming love that we've had the opportunity to experience and that our world desperately needs to experience. The second question I want to ask you guys this morning is, do you believe? So throughout the series, we've said that we have a theme verse that comes from 1 Corinthians 2:9. And 1 Corinthians 2:9 says, however, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. So we've been talking about these over these past few weeks. This verse, it says, beyond your wildest imagination, beyond what you could ever comprehend or come up with, is what God has in store for those who love him. Do you actually take God at his word in that? Do you actually believe God? And I don't just mean in a way that you can nod and say yes, but in a way that your life is shaped by the words of these. I love this verse because this verse, if I actually believe this in my life, then it should be evident to everybody that I live my life in a way that says, I believe that what God has prepared for me, both in this life and in eternity, is beyond what I could ever comprehend. I'd encourage you, after these 4 weeks, we're not going to be talking about this verse every week, make this verse your lock screen. Memorize it. Tattoo it on your arm. I don't care. Do one of those like Christian decor things in your kitchen where have this verse around and continue to ask yourself, do I actually take God at his word in this? Because I believe if you do, and if you consider yourself to be a friend and someone who loves people, then there would be no greater desire in your life than for people to experience what this verse says that they can experience. Who wouldn't want their loved ones to experience that? And I know we all do, but your actions show that we believe in a way that we're actively trying to reach people with this. See, God's love is not something to be selfishly hoarded by us who have experienced it. In fact, I think selfishness is the opposite of love. It's like the antithesis to love. God doesn't give us his love to suddenly become selfish consumers and be like, I've experienced it, I'm good. He gives us his love to say, hey, now you should be more selfless than you've ever been before and actively pursue those who haven't experienced this. I believe if we truly believe and we truly love, we would have to spend little time talking about this and preaching about this idea of thinking out and living louder, engaging with the world around us. But I think we'll always need to keep talking about it because we're humans and we struggle with things, right? Like we all know we should eat better. We all know we should eat less, but we don't. We know we should exercise more, but we don't. We know we should watch TV less or we should read more, we should do whatever, but we don't. We know we should reach people with Jesus' love, but we're often complacent or lazy or scared or whatever it is that keeps us back from this. We're going to look at a passage in Jeremiah chapter 1 this morning. And if you're new here, we do these kind of Bible reading plans throughout the year to make Bible reading a little bit more engaging for people here. And so maybe you've been doing the GRIP 2.0 plan here. If you're new here and you haven't heard about it, you can grab a journal from the info center if you want. Whether you do or not, or you're taking part or not, we're going to talk about Jeremiah 1, which is this week's reading. And it's a really cool passage, and I spent quite a while in it this week and really enjoyed it. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a backstory before we start reading. So what's going on, if you read the Old Testament narrative, it's basically this narrative that takes place over a long time where God has these people, and they're called the nation of Israel. And he has this covenant relationship with them, where he cares about them, and he takes care of them, he provides for them, he set out laws and rules for their well-being, and he loves them. But if you've read the Old Testament, you know what happens is they slowly but surely turn away, and they decline and decline. And somewhere along the line, Israel becomes two nations because they can't get along. It's another northern kingdom Israel, southern kingdom Judah. And both of these nations end up in exile. Israel in 722 BC and Judah in 586 BC. But along the ways they continue to decline, what happens is God, throughout time, he sends these people that he calls prophets. And what a prophet is someone who brings God's message to people. And these prophets, if you read some of it sounds kind of like doom and gloom and pretty intense, but really what they're saying is turn to God and his amazing grace and forgiveness and love, and it will transform your life. And in Israel and Judah's case, it will also save your nation. If you know the story, you know that none of the nations actually do turn. Most of the prophets are prophets in the southern kingdom Judah. Hardly any of them are in Israel. And Jeremiah is this prophet that God sends to the southern kingdom Judah, and he's prophesying to them at the end of kind of this decline, the last 5 kings before they get exiled. And things are getting really bad. I mean, throughout time, they've turned to all kinds of vile practices and sin and stuff that doesn't honor God. They've started worshiping pagan false gods that they've adopted from countries around them. And the practices that come with these false gods are like unbelievable. I mean, some of them are really bad. Well, there's this one god that they start worshiping, and people start sacrificing their children to this god. This is how bad, this is how far off course they've gotten. And so this is Jeremiah's context. He's in a place that is not a very Christian nation, if you could call it that, not really excited about God, and they're kind of falling off the deep end, and they're about to hit the end of their decline. So anyways, Jeremiah 1, verse 4, this starts like this. It says, "The word of the Lord came to me," Jeremiah, because he's writing this, "saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." So God shows up and he's talking to Jeremiah, and this is where he's kind of commissioning him. And he says, Jeremiah, before you were in your mother's womb, before you were born, I knit you together. I made you exactly the way you are on purpose. And he's speaking specifically to Jeremiah here, but if you read the rest of the biblical text, you'll know that this is the language that God talks about his children with. God looks at you and says, I knit you together in your mother's womb. I gave you the gifts and talents. You exist where you exist and how you exist, and you look the way you look because I created you that way with intention. And then God says that he appointed him. When he says, I appointed you, what he's saying is, Jeremiah, I literally made you for this. You know, like at some point, a guy made a toaster. And why'd he make that? For one purpose, right? Bread in, toast out. That is what a toaster does. And God's saying to Jeremiah, I made you for this. You were created to experience relationship with me and to be a voice to others that they needed to experience relationship with me. But what comes next? Jeremiah is a human like all of us. He's not a superstar just because his name's in the Bible. He's a human like us. So what comes next is the excuses, because he's a human like us. So in verse 6, he says, Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. So here's what Jeremiah's saying. He's like, God, I know that you know everything, that you created the universe, that you're beyond time, that you know everything about me even better than I do. But here's what you don't understand, God. Here's what you haven't thought about. Here's what you haven't considered. And God must just chuckle, like, are you kidding? Like, did you not just hear what I said? I created you. Here's what you don't understand. And then God comes back, and in verse 7 it says, But the Lord said to me, Do not say, I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. And then he preempts his next excuse. He says, Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you. So he answers his first excuse, and then he's like, I know more excuses are coming. So he answers it. He says, Don't be afraid. And then finishes off in verse 9 and says, Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. So the third question I have for you today is, will you obey? Will you obey? See, it says that God appointed Jeremiah. Now, I know this text is specifically to Jeremiah, and I don't want to pretend that everything that's ever said to Jeremiah applies to us, but if you read the Bible, you know that this mission is the same for every believer in Jesus Christ. Everybody who follows Jesus Christ, this mission is that we've been appointed and created for this, the chief purpose of knowing God and helping others know him as well. And then I love in verse 7 how he says, Go and say everything I command for you to say. God isn't saying, hey, he's not asking Jeremiah. He's not like, hey, here's a good idea. Maybe you can you go talk about it with your friends, see what you think, come back to me with some feedback. He's saying, I'm commanding you. I'm not asking you. I'm not asking for your permission, Jeremiah. This is your job. I created you for this. Go and do this. Practice your job description. Your job title as a prophet, a follower of Jesus, and his time a follower of God, is to do this. Will you do it? John 14:23-24, Jesus says, Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. Pretty straightforward. You love Jesus. You can't say, I love Jesus. I just hate everything he commands, so I'm just not going to do it, but I love him so much, I just don't obey him at all. That's not how it works. I mean, you can say, I struggle with some of the things he teaches because I'll be right beside you. There's some of it's hard. But it's not optional to just say, I love Jesus, I just am completely disobedient to him. To love God with all your heart, soul, and your mind includes obeying his commands. But we as humans have so many excuses. We have an excuse for everything and every opportunity that we have to share our faith in Jesus Christ with others. We all do, and I get it, I struggle with that. And I think the reason we have that is because thinking out, engaging with the world around us, bringing Jesus' message to other people is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's always messy and uncomfortable. It requires sacrifice. It's difficult. Sometimes we feel like we don't know enough. Or maybe we're scared because it won't be successful. If they're not going to come to know Jesus anyways, then why should I tell them about Jesus? For example, I love last week when Doug was talking about thinking small. And he encouraged people in small groups to turn it up by inviting new people out to their small groups, whether it's people here at church or coworkers or friends. He said, invite people out to your small group. But what happens? I mean, that idea sounds great, but in reality, you're in a small group, what happens, Someone's like, oh, we're bringing a new couple, and you're like, oh, but What if they're like, I don't like them, they're weird? What if they're like those crazy board game people that show up with board games and I don't want to play board games with them? Or like, I was planning on sharing some like personal stuff this week, but now there's a new couple, so, or my wife's on snacks, and she made 8 muffins. Now there are 12 people here. What do we do? There's a problem. You can swing by my house, I will lend you a knife. Or else I'll say, give them the freaking muffin. Like, I don't care. Or your living room's too full, Oh, we're running out of couch space. Sit on the floor. Let someone have your spot on the couch. And we can laugh about that. But I get it. Our excuses, just because we can kind of laugh about them when we talk about them, doesn't mean that they're not real. For me, I'll be honest with where I'm at. I don't really struggle in that way. Here's where I struggle. For me to tell someone about Jesus, I'm not really scared about that. And I'm not really scared about them being like, no, I'm not into that. That doesn't freak me out too bad. For me, I have a fairly full life. I've started taking classes through Briarcrest Seminary. I work way more than full-time here at FBC, which I love. And I like to have a little bit of a social life here and there. I lead a grade 11 boys small group as well. Lots going on. My time is pretty used up in a lot of ways. The good news is that in December we're having a kid, and I hear that slows things down and makes things easier. So that'll be like the nice reprieve. So you guys are all like, I'm so excited for him to find out that's not true. But I'm not saying my life's different than you guys. I get it. We're all busy. For me, I struggle because sometimes it freaks me out that when I'm telling someone about Jesus, it might be too successful. Because they might be like, wow, that sounds really great. Can we start getting together and you tell me more about that? So I'm like, no, I don't want to. I'm selfish with my time in those ways. What if it goes so well and they're like, well, man, that guy loves Jesus and like I really need help, so he calls me at 2 a.m. And what if he runs into financial troubles and needs some of my money or something? I don't know. That freaks me out. And again, it's funny to kind of laugh about, but I'm sure there are people here that could relate to that. And we have an excuse for everything. Maybe for you, your excuse is your finances. Maybe it's fear, But remember that Jeremiah lived in a very hostile environment, and God said, don't worry about it. I got you. Thinking out is always messy. Maybe you bring a friend to church, and it's the week that Doug decides to talk about tithing, and you're like, oh, man, that's awkward, I don't know what it is. Maybe you're afraid that you'll lose relationships. Maybe you're afraid that it will make things uncomfortable at your workplace if you talk about Jesus. Maybe you're afraid that you'll get passed over for a job promotion. Maybe you'll lose your job. Maybe anything. And these are all valid concerns, but on the other end of that, maybe, just maybe, someone, because you opened up your mouth and let people know about the faith and the amazing hope that you have in Jesus Christ, and you looked past the excuses for a second and trusted Jesus, maybe, just maybe, someone has the opportunity to experience the incredible, life-changing grace of and love of Jesus Christ that we've been so blessed to experience in our lives. And I gotta say, that must be more worth it than all the excuses. Jeremiah 1:9, God says, I have put my words in your mouth. The cool thing is that God equips us for this. He doesn't just say, hey, I want you to make me known to the nations. Have at it. He doesn't say, you're on your own, pal. See, when we talk about thinking big here at church, we hope that experiencing faith in a large church community transforms your relationship with Jesus Christ. When we talk about thinking small, we hope and believe that experiencing small relationships, joining a small group, will truly impact the ways that you engage with God. And when we talk about thinking in, we know that spending time reading your Bible and praying and drawing close to God and getting to know Him will revolutionize your life in ways that you could never imagine. And that's amazing. But that's not just for you. When you experience that, that's for other people who don't know Jesus, and you might not even know who that's for yet. But that is not just for you, so don't be selfish with what you experience in that. And there's probably a spectrum of how well we're doing with this here. Maybe some of you are those people that are so bold and let everyone around you know about the amazing love you found in Jesus Christ. Maybe some of you hear me talk about this, like, I picked the wrong Sunday to be here because I don't want to tell people I'm a follower of Jesus, and I get that. Wherever you are on that spectrum, we want to encourage you this morning to turn it up. even if you're doing really well with that, continue to turn it up. Until there are 30,000 people in this church on a Sunday morning, continue to turn it up. God is not done his work until every single person on planet Earth has experienced his amazing love and grace. And I think this plays out in so many ways. Mostly what I'm talking about is more of a verbal expression of that, because I think by and large, a lot of us don't struggle to think that Christians should be nice people, that people should be like, oh, that person's a Christian, they're kind of kind. If you're struggling with being kind of nice and kind and a decent human being, then yes, I think that's a huge part of thinking out. This plays out in a lot of ways. Like for Sean, his story about him and his wife adopting a child who needed parents and loving her and raising her to know Jesus Christ, that's an amazing way to think out. Maybe you shovel your neighbor's walk. That's incredible. Maybe you serve in the community in some way. I don't know. Maybe you just say nice things to people. Maybe you're the encourager at work where people are like, man, if you want to pick me up today, go talk to that dude. He will let you know that your life has value just by talking to him. And that's all important, but I'm so convinced that as Christians, we've let ourselves become so silent about the reason that we're kind, the reason that we're encouraging, the reason that we serve, and we need to let people know about the amazing love and hope that we can find in Jesus Christ. Who cares if people know that we're nice if they never know that Jesus Christ is the reason that we're nice? The Bible doesn't call us to be secret agent Christians. We're not called to be ninjas for Jesus, you know? We're not called to keep this quiet. We're called to live louder. What we've received in Jesus Christ is too good to be kept a secret. I want to close with something really quickly. Maybe these questions I'm asking, maybe they're too big and too ambiguous for you. Maybe they're really challenging and convicting this morning. Our desire is never for you to come to FBC and feel like you've been beat up because you're not a good enough Christian or anything like that. We hope that we can just ask some challenging and convicting questions that will encourage you to pursue Jesus more passionately. And so as a result, I want to share with you kind of a picture, an idea, a vision I have. It's not like highly theological or anything, but this is a way that I often think about it, and this motivates me, and maybe this is a helpful picture to you. I shared this with my small group leaders and welcome team over the last few weeks, so if this is your second time hearing this, sorry about that. But this is what I think about. I think one day, a long time from now, when I'm in eternity with Jesus, when I'm in heaven with Jesus, I don't know what that's going to look like. I know it's going to be amazing. I know it's beyond what any eye has seen or ear has heard or mind can conceive, but I know it's going to be incredible. And I picture one day Jesus coming up to me and just saying, hey, Ryan, come check this out. I got to show you something. And me just being like, well, what is it? He's like, just come check this out. And then he takes me, and I don't know if there's like a front door or entryway or gate for heaven. Well, in my vision, there is because it's nice and ordered vision. But I don't know if there is, but he brings me to this front door. And he's like, check this out, watch this. And then this guy walks through the door, and he says, Ryan, do you recognize that guy? And maybe I say, he looks familiar, but I don't really know who that is. And Jesus just says, that's a guy that you ran into somewhere. You bumped into him somewhere. You guys started chatting, and you just invited him out to a church. You just said, hey, you want to come check out church? And he came. And that sparked a bit of a change in his life. He kept coming. Kept hearing about Jesus. He met some friends who told him more about me, and eventually he decided to commit his life to following me. And as a result of that simple invite, you bringing the awkwardness of church and Jesus into a conversation with a random stranger and letting yourself become a little uncomfortable, now he's here with us for eternity. And then I picture Jesus wrapping his arms around me and giving me a hug and saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. And then he whispers into my ear, keep it on the DL, but his family's all going to be here as a result too. You know, or maybe for you, it's like Jesus is like, hey, come check this out. That girl that's coming in right now, you don't remember her at all. She was short change for her groceries at Superstore. And because my teachings are to be generous in the Bible, you paid for the rest of her groceries. You helped her carry them to her car. And you started talking to her about Jesus. You invited her to church. She never came, but years down the road, she remembered that. And she started going to a church, and she accepted Jesus. And or maybe Jesus is like, see that couple coming in? You didn't have space in your small group, but you decided, who cares? Let's invite them. And now they're here. And because eventually they started their own small group, other people will be coming too. When I read 1 Corinthians 2:9, I agree with the text. I can't comprehend what God has in store for those who love him. But I think when I think of a picture like that, I get a small glimpse of maybe the satisfaction and the joy that gives us a small picture of maybe what that passage is talking about. I don't know if that picture is helpful for you or not, but that motivates me to know that I can invest into something that's eternal, both through my actions, through my thoughts, the ways I live my life, but eventually by letting people know about how God has impacted my story in incredible ways. Living loud and thinking out is messy, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but there's really nothing more worth it on planet Earth. Over the past few weeks, we've asked you to think up, or to turn it up in the ways that you think in. We've asked you to think bigger. We've asked you in the ways that you think small to love better, and we've asked you now in the ways that you think out to live louder. The love, the message, the goodness, the grace that you've received in Jesus Christ is just too good to be kept a secret. We need to let this thing out. We need to let the world know. We have to be willing to live louder and to turn it up. Let me pray for you guys. God, thank you so much for your incredible love and your grace. Please help us be a church that makes serving you in this way our chief aim, to know you and to make others known by you, or to make you known to others, God. Thank you so much for this morning, this awesome faith community. Please just use us to change the world around us. We love you so much, God. Thank you for this morning. Amen. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you next week.